Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. This is City Talk. It's still broken after all these years. The most dysfunctional in the nation. The Daily News calls it defiantly bad. It's the New York State Legislature. Ooh. Here to tell us how bad it really is Laura Seago, co-author of a recently released study of the state legislature by the Brennan Center, the folks who made Albany and dysfunctional synonymous. Laura, along with Andrew Stengel and Lawrence Norton, found the legislature, surprise, surprise, still broken. Laura is a research associate at the Center's Democracy Program, where she focuses on voting rights and government accountability. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you for having me.
Some week in Albany, Joe Bruno's indicted. You had the Senate replacement show, and it's still dysfunctional after all these years. And Speaker Silver is not very happy with you folks.
He certainly isn't. He thinks that the reforms that the Assembly passed in 2005 have satisfied the complaints of reform advocates, but unfortunately, we still think that there's a lot that Speaker Silver could be doing to catch up, and we hope that the Senate will adopt reforms that will embarrass the Assembly into following suit.
Oh, Shelley's the bad guy in this piece?
I don't know if there's any one particular bad guy. I mean, Albany has been broken.
There's a bunch of bad guys.
There's a bunch of bad guys.
Nice.
Albany's been broken for more than a generation. And all we need, though, is a few good guys to fix it. When the Democrats were in the minority in the Senate, they unanimously voted in favor of comprehensive rules reform. And we certainly hope that now they have the majority, they're going to do that again and actually enact real rules reform.
Okay, let's talk about that. We're in early 2009, and the State Senate has proposed a series of quote-unquote reforms. And if I might quote from the press release, let's just look at the headline. Senate majority announces passage of historic rules. They're characterizing their own work as historic. Reform that will create more inclusive and accountable Senate. Verdict?
Well, it's a good first step, but obviously we're disappointed that they didn't enact full rules reform.
What are they proposing, and why isn't it real reform?
Well, the reforms that they passed last week were relatively minimal. It was allowing bills to be discharged out of committee, which is good, and which is something that the Brennan Center has recommended.
But they don't usually
easier.
Discharge bills out of committee.
Right.
Okay, doesn't sound good.
Allowing for open sponsorship of bills, which actually
that the Republicans can do it?
Right.
If they're in the minority?
Right, which actually isn't something that we covered in the report. It wasn't a priority of our reforms,
but it's good.
It's good.
But it's what?
But it's sort of a throwaway, I guess. And some language on transparency, and that's really important to us.
Language or proposed actions on transparency?
Well, unfortunately, it just really remains to be seen what they're going to do. They say something along the lines of, to the greatest extent possible, the products of the legislative process will be made available to the public on the internet. Now, that's generally good, but that could mean a lot of things. And
the
so,
devil, quote, is in the details.
Exactly, the devil's in the details.
And you don't trust them?
Well, I don't know. There's some good people on the reform committee. The bigger rules reforms are going to come out in April, or the recommendations for reform are going to come out in April. Because
they formed a temporary study commission to look at the rules.
That's right. That's right. And there are some good people on that committee. Senator Liz Krueger, in particular, has been
we'll come back to Liz.
advocate.
Yep.
And we certainly hope that they can push through more comprehensive rules reform. But in that, we really don't know what's going to happen. And
do they?
What I hope has happened is that they've sort of boxed themselves into a place where they have to enact real reform. They could have just ignored the issue, and within a year it would have died. Nobody would have remembered.
No, you would have nagged them, the editorial board. No, come on.
The Brennan Center would have remembered. But they did come out and say, here's your down payment on reform. Here are these three things. And there's more to come. We've got this committee. We've got strong leadership on the committee. And you're going to see bigger rules reforms in April. And so it's really our hope that if they come out with, really negligible reforms, then people are going to rise up and say you can't do that. They're going to say, where is
you got to do an epilogue.
Your promises.
You got to do an epilogue. Still broken after all these. Okay, this report is really the third in a series. The first was produced in 2004 and really gave us the word dysfunctional as a synonym for Albany, and was called, you know, the little drive, the New York State legislative process and evaluation and blueprint for reform. Then 2 years later, it became unfinished business, the New York State legislative reform, a 2006 update, and now it's still broken. Okay, let's talk about, before we talk about how good it is, let's talk about how bad it is. Characterize the New York State legislature. Do an indictment. What's wrong with the New York State legislature as it's now organized, its processes, structures? Go ahead.
Well, it's difficult to know where to begin because there's no robust deliberative process at any stage in lawmaking, and there are a couple of levels of that. The first is at the committees, and in Congress and in most state legislatures, the committees are really where legislation is made. And it's where senators take time to learn about an issue, to get a fiscal analysis, and to really have debate, to mark up a bill, to make sure that it's in good shape to go to the floor.
And they don't do
That's where they build expertise. They don't even show up to their committee meetings. Under the current Senate rules, they are allowed to essentially fax in a signed agenda that shows their votes on the bills that they're going to discuss that day. They don't have to read it.
They don't have to read it in the presence of it. They don't have to be there.
Right.
This is both the Assembly and the Senate?
This is in the Senate. The Assembly actually did do away with this in 2005, and that's one small area in which they deserve some praise.
And they responded to your 2004 study.
That's correct. That's correct. Unfortunately, in the Assembly, there are other problems. For example, the Codes and Ways and Means Committee can request bills that are way outside their jurisdiction and sit on them.
And they're doing it to kill them.
And they're doing it to kill them.
And they're doing it to kill them on whose orders? The speakers? I mean, who wants them dead?
Well, the conventional wisdom is that the leadership has a stranglehold on bills coming to the floor, and that's something that our research supports. And so it probably is the three men in the room, or perhaps the one man in the room, the speaker, who's saying, you know what, either this bill isn't going to pass, and so we don't ever want to make it to the floor, because 100% of bills pass the floor once they get there. Or
100%.
100%.
There's no exception. Any bill that, so the leader knows before the bill gets to the floor that it's going to be passed, and it's going to be passed almost unanimously.
It's a foregone conclusion. And actually, when we were going through floor transcripts and researching this report, somebody on the floor of the Senate said, it's like professional wrestling. We already know the outcome, but we just have to do this big show to
that's entertaining. Oh no!
To prove that we got somewhere.
Okay, what else in the indictment?
Well, there's not a whole lot of dissent on the floor either. Once bills make it out of committee with no discussion, they can sometimes be bad bills, but they're very rarely debated on the floor. Over 80% of bills in both chambers pass the House with no debate at all. And almost over 90% pass both chambers, or I believe it's over 90 in the Senate and over 85 in the Assembly, with no substantive debate. That means that a bill comes to the floor, somebody stands up and says, here's why I'm supporting it. I'm going to stake my claim on this issue. And then the bill passes with no questions asked, no back and forth, no discussion of the merits of the bill. And
it's essentially the Speaker in the Assembly and the Majority Leader in the Senate, at least traditionally, that have determined or exclusively determined what gets to the floor.
That's right. That's right. And committee chairs don't have the ability to even control their own staff or their own budgets to examine issues. Rank and file members can't call hearings to allow the public to weigh in.
Now, do they want to do it, or, I mean, let me be a little cynical here, that it's good for them. They don't have to think. Shelley does the thinking, or the leadership does the thinking, and they draw their salary, and this benefits them.
Well, a lot of rank and file members really do want to do policy work, but they don't have the resources to do so.
Okay.
That's another issue. Is the
okay, so you're less of a cynic than I am. Okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly constituent services are very important to our legislators, and they do a lot of, taking care of people's garbage cans and things like that. But a lot of them do want to do real policy work. I mean, the reason that Ruben Diaz is so afraid of the gay marriage issue is because there are people there who want to pass that bill, and they want to get something done for people in New York State. And that's partially why we focus on issues that are enacted into law, because that's what affects New Yorkers, and that's what they're actually getting done.
Right, not the 18,000 bills that are introduced, and they know that 90 99% of them are dead on arrival,
right.
but they're scoring points with somebody.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
What else? What else is wrong?
Well, there aren't a whole lot of fiscal notes on file for major legislation. There are some fiscal notes where you have to get...
Meaning the fiscal impact of the proposed policy?
The fiscal impact of the proposed policy.
And they're supposed to have this by constitutional law, and they don't?
Yeah, it's by their very own rules.
Oh, well,
they have
to be broken.
They have to have fiscal impact, and actually in the Senate, the rules say that they have to keep the fiscal notes on file with the Finance Committee. And when I called up the Finance Committee this fall, they said, well, we don't have any fiscal notes for 2006. We can send you what we have for 2007. And
did this surprise you?
In a way, it did. You know, you hope for more.
Okay.
But
okay.
We're hoping for more now.
Anything else? What else is in this indictment? So we've got stranglehold over the legislative process. The committees are powerless. General members are powerless. What else?
Bills aren't well considered, and that can be very, very problematic when
they don't even read them.
They don't even read them.
Nice.
The public doesn't get a chance to weigh in. Again, they're lacking fiscal analysis. And in the brownfields legislation, that's a great example. They passed a bill in 2003 and said, we don't really know how much this is going to cost, and didn't really analyze the impact. So they had to go back in 2007 and essentially clean up the bill. And it was the comptroller, Tom DiNapoli, who was actually really involved in holding hearings and looking into how much this was going to cost, because the legislature just wasn't doing that work. There's also just a general lack of oversight of government programs. We have a few committees that have oversight jurisdiction over our elections.
But do they do it?
They don't do it.
Okay, so they have oversight, but they're not performing.
Exactly.
So they're getting all these Lulus, and you're telling me that they're not doing anything, or they're not doing much.
Exactly.
Oh, very nice. Go ahead. Is there anything else wrong before we get to the one or two things that they've obviously done right, or not so obviously done
well,
right?
as I mentioned at the outset, transparency is something that's really important to us, and it's one of the least transparent legislatures that we came across. We didn't do the broad comparative work that we did in 2004 with
where it was the most dysfunctional. We don't know if we're the most dysfunctional.
We might not be, but it's certainly not pretty. We know that it hasn't gotten better since 2004.
So we hope somebody else got worse.
Exactly. But what we do know is places like Connecticut and California that don't have huge state budgets to do this work still manage to make the product of their legislative process transparent. I think the problem in New York is that they'd actually have to generate real committee reports if they wanted to make them transparent. They'd have to generate real fiscal notes to make them transparent. They'd have to have committee meetings to put those minutes on the website. Okay, now my
question again is, do they want to do it? And are you optimistic that at some point they'll do it either willingly or not?
We're optimistic. Senator Smith has long promised broad-reaching rules reform. The Democrats voted unanimously in favor of rules reform in 2007, and they've made promises that they have to be held accountable for. And so we certainly hope that they can be held accountable, either holding themselves accountable or groups like the Brennan Center and their allies reminding them. We're going to be at the hearings, and we're going to be closely monitoring what happens between now and April.
So that's in a sense the bad news. You mentioned a little bit at the top with the proposed reforms and the recently enacted rules changes in the Senate that there's some good news.
Right.
What's the good news in the report? Make me feel a little bit good. No, don't make me feel good. Just what's good here? What's changed for the better?
Well, really, the good news in the report is that we're optimistic that we have new leadership, and it's a new opportunity.
That's it. You're just optimistic. I mean, there's nothing.
We haven't seen a whole lot of improvement. There's been minor improvement with messages of necessity, which we really focused on in 2004 and 2006 because they were being used. Messages of necessity are messages from the governor saying, "I need this in 3 days. Rush it through the." So
I don't have to read it. I don't have to know anything.
Exactly, and they were being used by the legislature. They were essentially going and soliciting them from the governor.
So they wouldn't have to do the
rush bills through.
Nice.
Right.
Now why? I mean, it's not simply laziness. There's got to be political as well as personal reasons involved in this.
Right. I mean, it's difficult to say, and this is something that we've come back to again and again, is, well, they can't just be doing this because they're lazy. They can't just be doing this because they're bad.
And you came up with what conclusion?
And partially it's because this is business as usual. This is how it's been done for so long. And if the leadership wants to make a big splashy show about passing a piece of legislation, a message of necessity is not the worst way to do that. Now, it's important to note that one of the reasons we may have seen messages of necessity decline slightly in 2006 and 2007 is because there was conflict during that time between the governor and the Senate.
The governor being whom?
Spitzer.
Being who? Spitzer.
Spitzer.
But this is not the case now, or we're just in a different part of the game?
It sort of remains to be seen at this point.
Because the budget's due April 1, and they haven't really started fighting yet.
Right. And one of the things that Sheldon Silver pointed out was, well, you know, the budget's so much of what we do, why don't you focus more on that? But actually, all of the major budget bills are included in our analysis of major legislation. And they're consistent with everything else that we find.
Okay, you've come to the conclusions of what's right and what's wrong, and mainly what's wrong. How do you come to these conclusions? I mean, after all, I'm a professor. What was your methodology? How did you study the New York State legislature?
Sure. Well, we did a lot of quantitative analysis, which involved taking all of the major legislation that's designated. It's defined by McKinney's Session Laws of New York.
Okay.
And
so it's a legal definition rather than a political definition?
And McKinney sort of documents and collects all of the workings of the legislature.
Sure.
And they say that it's major legislation of impact in New York that might be of interest to people of the legal profession.
Right.
So it's every broad-reaching bill really is captured within the major legislation. There are about 200 in each year.
So this is your sample that you're working with out of the 18,000. No, these are actual laws rather than bills. You're talking about
these
past
are bills
legislation.
enacted into law. That's correct.
These are not bills. These are things that have gone through both houses and signed by the governor or overridden the governor's veto, but we haven't seen that. Okay.
Exactly. And so we log all those bills and we look at the number of yay and nay votes they received in each of the committees in which they were...
to determine what? Just
to determine
unanimity?
dissent.
Right.
Dissent
then there's no dissent.
Right, exactly.
Okay,
Well, there's little dissent.
Go ahead.
Same yay and nay votes on the floor. We got floor transcripts for the debate on all of those bills and read through them to see if there was any debate at all or if there was substantive debate. We looked at whether or not there was a message of necessity. Obviously, we looked at the number of amendments and when the bill was amended.
And the amendments, I presume, don't come to the floor unless the Speaker allows it? Are there a lot of amendments?
More or less. There are very
Don't they do it beforehand?
There are very few amendments on the floor that are not made by the sponsor themselves. If a bill is amended on the third reading, the sponsor gets to do it, and there's no discussion whatsoever.
That's democratic.
Right. And the number of amendments that are actually voted on the floor was incredibly small. It was 2 or 3 in each year of amendments that are actually voted on by the full chamber. And, and amendments are really important, obviously, because if you don't happen to sit on a committee, but you feel like you have something to bring to bear on a conversation, that is your opportunity. And first, they have to sort of amendment sponsors have to clear a hurdle of actually getting their amendment to a vote before it's even voted on, and then they're always voted down. And so really the only person who gets to amend the bill on the floor is the sponsor, and if you're not friendly with the bill sponsor, you're out of luck.
And you've got the imprimatur of the Speaker. Right. I mean, if the Speaker doesn't give his, in this case, his go-ahead, forget it.
Right.
Okay, so what else do you study? I mean, you've got this data. What else do you do?
Right. Well, we look at the time between when the bill was introduced and when it was passed, and the time between and the number of bills that passed at the very end of the legislative session is an extraordinary number.
Yeah, what's the, I mean, like...
It's over 70% passed in the last month, and nearly a third passed in the last 3 days. And there's no time to discuss or deliberate those bills.
Explain why. Why? I mean, we talked about sort of laziness, the traditional way of doing business. That's it?
Well, partially it's that members who've been trying to force bills out of committee for so long only can do that at the very end of session because there's a certain number of days that bills have to wait before a motion to discharge can even be brought forward.
But the Speaker allows that to happen? I mean, I'm sort of describing the Speaker as a totalitarian dictator, which you may not buy, but go ahead.
Well, I mean, once a bill has been sitting in committee for 30 days and say it actually finally makes it to the committee agenda by mid-April, you don't really have much of a chance to get it out at all. And motions to discharge very well could fail. It's very difficult to bring a motion to discharge. So that's one thing that, to his credit, Senator Smith did introduce in these initial set of reforms that are sort of our down payment.
Right. Almost basically the day after you guys released the study.
Right.
What years does this study cover? It covers 2006, 2007.
It covers 2006, 2007, and only anecdotal evidence for 2008. A lot of our evidence did come from interviews with legislators themselves on both sides of the aisle. And especially after the elections, members of the former Senate majority were very interested to talk to us.
Right.
Because,
well, this is not a surprise.
Right. And so we actually have discussions from both members on both sides of the aisle who were able to tell us in 2008, not a single successful discharge motion passed again. Or
in a whole year.
Right.
Now, are you guys putting together a 2008, or we have to wait 2 more years that we get a 2008, 2009?
It'll really depend on what happens this year. If they pass real rules reform, we'll want to study the impact of that. If they don't, we'll have to really assess what can be done to push them forward.
So you're in business no matter what. I mean, if they continue messing up, you've got them. And if they do, I mean, is there an epilogue to this?
I don't know if you should look for a published report, but we're certainly following this very closely.
But I don't necessarily mean a published epilogue. There will be an epilogue to this.
Absolutely, absolutely, and we're already starting to do that on our Reform New York blog, and
which is excellent, by the way.
Why, thank you. And we're going to be at the hearings. We're going to continue to monitor what they do and bring attention to what they're doing. And we're going to continue to offer advice. We have a full slate of rules recommendations at the back of the report that's ready to hand to the Senate.
Okay, that's my next question. I mean, how does the center propose to fix some of these problems, ameliorate some of these problems? What are your recommendations? And then let's talk about, the likelihood of this happening.
Well, we have a suite of about 24 reforms that we want to see passed, and each one addresses a specific rule and a specific problem. So, for example, we think that they should enact a rule that says members must be physically present to cast a vote in committee, which seems like a simple solution.
Excuse me. Now, I mean, for example, what are the odds of this happening? I mean, take a guess. I don't know.
In the Senate, I would say the odds are better than not of it happening with good members on the Rules Recommendations Committee. I mean,
this is minimal. Let's not get too excited about this.
Once again, we're really interested in holding the Democrats accountable for the promises they've already made.
Okay, what
else?
These
are promises they've already made.
What else?
Enacting conference committees is a very simple solution.
Joint conversations between the Senate and the Assembly.
Exactly, and making the bill sponsor able to call those, as well as the leadership themselves.
Explain why. Why do these folks have to get together? I mean, what is the legislative advantage of having them together? Well, they've got to pass the same bill.
They've got to pass the same bill, and frequently they'll pass bills that are similar, but not exactly the same, and then the leadership gets together, 3 men in a room, and decides, okay, this is the one we want.
Okay, this is a way to disperse power.
Exactly, exactly. And really that's what all of this is about, is dispersing power, making it easy enough for a quarter of committee members to call a committee meeting, even if the chair doesn't want to do that. Making it easier to call an oversight hearing and actually requiring all of the committees to conduct an oversight hearing on one program within their jurisdiction a year.
Again,
we're not talking about all of them.
We're not taking revolution here. We're talking about real incremental but important change.
Right. These are very simple, pragmatic reforms.
What else?
Making it so that actuaries who prepare fiscal notes must attest to no conflict of interest.
Yeah, we had. Wasn't there a huge conflict of interest?
There was a huge conflict of interest. Somebody who was on the union payroll was weighing in on a bill that would deal with his particular income, and he later came out and said, you know what, my estimations were a step above voodoo. And
that shouldn't jaw drop. I mean, you get the policy analysis you pay for.
Right. Okay. Exactly.
What else?
Opening up the legislative process to the public, again, I can't overemphasize enough.
Meaning what?
Meaning putting transcripts of floor debates and committee meetings on the internet.
Hold them.
But they have to hold them.
Okay.
Making real substantive committee reports. We asked for the committee reports from the Senate, and what we got was, this is the subject of the bill, here's who supports it, here's who opposes it, yes, no, it has a fiscal note attached.
That's it?
And I want analysis.
So they're not required to provide a legislative rationale that in some way explains the reasons why, the cost and benefits, economics, none of that.
They're not doing it. An argument can be made that the rules already require it, but they're certainly not fulfilling the spirit of the rules.
Okay. These new Senate proposed rule, well, the actual changes in some rules, and the April deadline for other changes. Was this in some way a response to this latest report? How much of it was this Three Amigos drill that we just went through? Well, why did they move?
Right. Well, I would like to think it was a response to the report. We went up in Albany on the first day of session to release this, and we made sure that it got in the right hands. And then Andrew Stengel, one of my colleagues, went up and stood with them when they announced their down payment on reform.
Sure.
And we really do want to help them make it better.
Right.
We're positioning ourselves as a resource.
You want to push them in the right direction.
Exactly, exactly.
Them,
and this leadership fight should be taken into account. I mean, it's certainly conceivable that if the leadership fight hadn't occurred, if this Three Amigos issue hadn't come to bear, that they would have passed a full slate of rules reform. We can never know.
Okay. Or maybe even fewer?
Right. I mean, who knows?
It's
difficult to say. I mean, what's interesting is that while the gang of three, the three holdouts, were saying that they just didn't like the way that the Democrats were running their caucus, they didn't like the way the legislature was being run, they weren't necessarily outspoken in their support of rules reform.
Okay, 30 seconds. Where do you hope to be in a year from now, institutionally? Or where do you hope the legislature will be a year from now, or 6 months from now, the end of the session?
We hope that the legislature will have seen the committee that needs to study the rules, release recommendations that reflect what's in our report, that reflect releasing the stranglehold on bills coming to the floor, making committees more deliberative, allocating resources effectively, and making the work of the legislature transparent. And we hope that when the committee makes those recommendations, they'll be adopted as the rules, and that is going to force the Assembly to follow suit.
Okay. Optimistic?
I'm optimistic that some of these reforms will pass. Obviously, where we hope to be is that they look at Appendix A of our report and say, great, here's our reform.
The great hope. Yeah, forget it.
Of course. But I am optimistic that some of these reforms will pass. We already saw motions to discharge come forward. We already saw language on transparency. They just need to follow it to its logical conclusion.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck. Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. Let us know what you think about this show. You can reach us at CUNY.TV. When you get there, click on the bar that says Contact Us and send your email. Whatever it is. Thanks, no thanks, obnoxious, do it. Send it.